moments when the universe does not adjust your life, it interrupts it. Not gradually, not in the slow accumulation of small developments that you only recognize as significant in retrospect, but in the sudden, unmistakable, specific way of something that has been holding firmly in place for a very long time suddenly releasing all at once. Today is that moment. Uranus is squaring the nodes of the moon. And if you are watching this today, before the shift fully activates, there is a reason. This is not a transit that announces itself gently. It is one of the rarest and most disruptive configurations in the sky, and it is happening now in your life at exactly the point in your journey where its disruption becomes liberation rather than chaos. Let me tell you exactly what is happening astrologically today, because the precision of this moment is extraordinary, and understanding the precision is what separates the people who receive today's shift consciously from the people who experience it as an unsettling feeling they cannot quite explain. Uranus is the planet of sudden change, awakening, and liberation. It does not move like the other planets. Most planetary transits work through gradual influence, through the slow accumulation of energy that builds toward an eventual shift. Uranus does not work this way. Uranus works through the break, the sudden disconnection, the unexpected event that arrives from a direction nobody was watching, and that changes the entire configuration of a situation in a single moment. The nodes of the moon represent the axis of your life's direction. The south node is the point of the familiar, the well-worn, the pattern that has carried you this far, but that has also, somewhere along the way, become a kind of gravity. A pull back toward what is known, even when what is known no longer serves what you are becoming. The north node is the point of growth, the direction your life is reaching toward, the unfamiliar territory that holds what you have not yet become but are constantly being drawn toward. When Uranus squares this axis, it does not gently nudge you from the south node toward the north node. It applies sudden, disruptive pressure to the entire axis. It shakes the structure that has been holding the south node pattern in place. And in the shaking, things that have been stuck for a long time, sometimes for years, suddenly move. This is the cosmic shock of today, not destruction for its own sake. The specific, necessary disruption that breaks the gravitational pull of the familiar so that what has been pulling you toward growth can finally have less resistance to pull against. Your reality will assemble around your frequency. This is the principle underneath everything Uranus does today. The external configuration of your life, the circumstances, the people, the opportunities, the doors that are open and the doors that are closed, are not fixed. They are constantly reassembling around the frequency you are emitting. And the south node patterns, the old gravitational pull, have been holding that frequency at a certain level. Today, Uranus breaks the hold. And when the hold breaks, the frequency shifts. And when the frequency shifts, the reality assembling around it has no choice but to shift with it. Now let me tell you the 3 specific ways your reality is shattering today. The first way is this: a situation that has been frozen suddenly thaws. You know the one. There is something in your life right now, a circumstance, a relationship, a project, a decision that someone else needs to make, a process that involves people or systems outside your control that has been frozen in place. Not moving forward, not formally ending either, just suspended. Held in the specific kind of limbo where you cannot plan around it because it might move at any time, and you cannot stop waiting for it because it has not closed. This frozen situation has been frozen for longer than felt reasonable. You have checked on it, hoped about it, tried not to think about it, and circled back to thinking about it anyway. It has occupied a specific amount of mental space simply by virtue of being unresolved. Not urgent exactly, but persistent. The background hum of an open question that never gets answered. Today, Uranus thaws it, not necessarily with the dramatic resolution that the length of the freeze might make you hope for. Sometimes the thaw is a single message after a long silence. Sometimes it is a sudden development that was not anticipated, coming from a direction that had stopped being watched. Sometimes it is simply the situation finally moving in either direction after sitting motionless for so long that the motionlessness itself had started to feel permanent. Whatever form it takes, the frozen situation begins to move today. Pay attention to anything that arrives that addresses this situation, even if it seems small, even if it seems like it is not quite the resolution you were hoping for. Uranus does not always deliver resolution in the form of a grand finale. Sometimes it delivers the first crack in the ice, and the crack is what matters because the crack is what proves the ice was never permanent. Watch for movement in the frozen thing today. It is thawing. The second way your reality shatters today is this: something hidden becomes visible. Uranus rules sudden revelation, the specific moment when something that has been operating below the surface, something you could feel but could not quite name, something that has been shaping your experience without your full awareness of how, suddenly becomes clear. This revelation today is personal. It relates to a specific area of your life where you have had the sense that there is more going on than you can fully see. A relationship where something feels slightly off but you cannot identify what. A situation at work where the dynamics seem more complicated than they are presented as. A pattern in your own behavior that you have sensed but never quite been able to articulate. Today, the missing piece arrives. It might come through a conversation that takes an unexpected turn and suddenly illuminates something. It might come through information that reaches you from an unexpected source. It might come through a moment of sudden internal clarity, the specific experience of something clicking into place that you had been circling for a long time without landing on. This revelation may not feel comfortable. Uranian revelations rarely do. The truth that arrives today might require you to see something you had been successfully not seeing. It might complicate a situation you had been holding as simple. It might require you to reconsider an assumption you had been operating from for a long time. But the discomfort of the revelation is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is a sign that something has gone right. You cannot navigate toward your North Node, toward the growth your life has been reaching for with incomplete information. And the revelation that arrives today is the completion of information that your growth requires. Receive it, even if it is uncomfortable, especially if it is uncomfortable. The discomfort is the size of the clarity. The third way your reality shatters today is this: a door that you stopped watching suddenly opens. This is the most unexpected of the three, because unlike the frozen situation which you have been actively aware of, and the hidden thing which you have sensed even if you could not name it, the door that opens today is one you stopped expecting to open a long time ago. Somewhere in your past there was a direction, a possibility, an opportunity that mattered to you, and at some point after enough time passed without movement, you stopped watching it, not necessarily through a conscious decision. Through the quiet, gradual redirection of attention that happens when something does not move for long enough that continuing to watch, it starts to feel like a kind of self-inflicted disappointment. You managed your expectations down. You stopped checking. You moved your attention to other things. Today that door opens, not because the universe waited for you to stop watching as some kind of test, because the work that needed to happen for that door to open has been happening this whole time on its own timeline, independent of whether you were watching or not. And today, Uranus delivers what that work was building toward. What comes through this door will feel different from an ordinary new opportunity. It will carry a specific quality of recognition, the sense of something returning rather than something arriving for the first time. The specific feeling of yes, this is what I used to want before I taught myself to stop wanting it. Do not let the surprise of it produce distrust. The lateness of an opening is not evidence that it is the wrong opening. It is evidence that it required exactly the amount of time it took. Receive it as what it is, the door that was always going to open, opening on its own schedule rather than on the schedule of your patience. Now let me speak about what to do with today, because Uranus transits respond to a very specific kind of engagement, and how you meet today determines whether you experience the full shift or only the disruption without the liberation. The first thing to do is to not immediately try to fix what shifts. When something that has been frozen suddenly moves, when something hidden suddenly becomes visible, when a door that was closed suddenly opens, the very human instinct is to immediately manage it, To assess it, plan around it, decide what it means, and bring it under control as quickly as possible. Resist that instinct today. Uranian shifts need a moment to be what they are before they are processed into what they mean. Let the movement happen without immediately deciding what it requires of you. Let the revelation land without immediately deciding what you are going to do about it. Let the open door be open for a moment before you start calculating how to walk through it. The shift is the gift. The immediate management of the shift is often the thing that reduces it back down to the size of what you were already expecting, before it has had a chance to be the size it actually is. The second thing to do is to notice the restlessness in your body and let it be there. Uranus transits have a specific physical signature, a kind of charged electric restlessness that does not attach to any particular cause. A sense that something is happening, a feeling of being more awake than usual, a quality of energy that does not fit neatly into the ordinary rhythm of the day. If you feel this today, do not interpret it as a problem to solve. It is not anxiety in the sense of something being wrong. It is the specific energetic signature of the planet of awakening moving through your feet. The restlessness is the energy of the shift itself, and it will settle on its own once the shift has done what it came to do. Let it be there. Do not numb it, do not distract from it, do not try to push it away. Just notice it and let it move through. And the third thing to do is to ask yourself honestly which direction you have been pulled toward and away from. This is the most important question today, because Uranus square the nodes is fundamentally about the tension between the south node, the familiar pull, and the north node, the growth direction. And the shift that happens today is most powerful when it is met with honest awareness of which pull you have been operating from. Is there a pattern in your life that you know somewhere underneath the surface you have outgrown, but that you keep returning to because it is familiar? Is there a direction that has been calling you, something that represents who you are becoming rather than who you have been, that you have been avoiding because it is unfamiliar and uncertain? You do not need to make any dramatic decisions today. You just need to be honest about the answer. Because today, the universe is providing exactly the kind of disruptive energy that makes movement toward the north node easier than usual, and resistance to the south node pattern lower than usual. Notice which direction you have been avoiding, and today let yourself move even slightly toward it. Now I want to speak about something specific to this particular Uranus node's alignment, something about why this configuration is rare and what makes it different from the more common transits that come and go without much disruption. Uranus moves slowly. It takes about 7 years to move through a single zodiac sign, and the nodes of the moon move in their own slow cycle as well, taking about 18.5 years to complete a full rotation through the zodiac. For these two to form an exact square, the kind of precise, activating alignment that produces the sudden, structure-shaking quality that Uranus is known for, requires a specific, relatively rare coincidence of their positions. This is not a transit that happens every month or even every year. The configuration today is part of a broader window where Uranus and the nodes are in a relationship that will not repeat in this exact form for a significant period of time. Which means whatever shifts today, whatever thaws, whatever becomes visible, whatever door opens is not a small, easily repeated event. It is part of a once-in-a-cycle alignment, and the timing of it landing today in your life at this point in your journey carries the weight of that rarity. What happens today is not background noise in an ordinary week. It is a marked moment in a larger cycle, and the chosen response to a marked moment is not passivity, it is presence. Being awake enough today to notice what is shifting and engaged enough to meet it rather than letting it pass by unrecognized. Now I want to address something honestly, because not everyone who encounters a message about a major shift feels excited by the prospect of disruption, even disruption that is framed as liberation. If you have been through a period where change has felt more like loss than like growth, where shifts in your circumstances have cost you things you valued, the idea of today being a day of cosmic shock might produce something closer to wariness than anticipation. That wariness makes sense. But here is something true about every Uranus transit in the life of someone who has done the genuine work of growth, even quiet, invisible, unacknowledged work. The size of the disruption is proportional to the size of the constraint it is removing. Uranus does not break things that are serving you. It breaks things that have stopped serving you but that you have not yet been able to release on your own, because the gravitational pull of the familiar was stronger than your willingness to let go. What breaks today is not random, it is specific. It is the exact constraint that has been the largest obstacle between where you are and where your life has been trying to go. And the discomfort of its breaking, if there is discomfort, is the discomfort of release, not the discomfort of loss. Let today happen. Whatever form it takes, whatever thaws, whatever becomes visible, whatever door opens, your reality will assemble around your frequency, and today the frequency is shifting, whether you consciously participate or not. But the people who consciously participate, who notice, who stay present, who let the shift be what it is without immediately managing it back into something smaller, are the people who receive the full measure of what today carries rather than a fraction of it. Now I want to go deeper on each of the three shifts, because the brief version describes what happens. The deeper version describes what to actually do with it when it arrives, and that is what makes the difference between a day that passes and a day that changes something. The frozen situation thawing, what to do in the first moment of movement. When something that has been stuck for a long time finally moves, there is a specific emotional sequence that tends to happen, and recognizing it in advance helps you move through it without getting stuck in any one part of it. The first emotion is often not relief, it is something closer to disbelief. After enough time in a frozen state, the mind adapts to the frozen state as the baseline. It stops actively expecting movement, even while still hoping for it, because actively expecting something that does not arrive is exhausting in a way that managing expectations downward is not. So when movement finally happens, the first response is often a kind of double take. Is this actually happening? Is this real? Is this the thing, or is this something that looks like the thing but is not quite it? This disbelief is not a flaw. It is the natural product of having adapted to a long absence of movement, but it is also, if it is allowed to persist too long, a way of partially missing the movement when it arrives. Spending the first hour, the first day, second-guessing whether something is really happening means spending the first hour, the first day, not actually engaging with what is happening. So here is what to do. When the movement arrives today, however it arrives, give yourself permission to believe it immediately, not cautiously, not with the qualifier of "we'll see if this goes anywhere," fully. As though this is exactly what you have been waiting for, because it might be, and the cost of believing it and being wrong is much smaller than the cost of not believing it and missing the actual thing because you were busy doubting it. The second emotion, often arriving close behind the first, is a kind of grief. This sounds strange because the movement is what you wanted, but there is a specific grief that attaches to the ending of a frozen state, even a frozen state you wanted to end. The frozen state, uncomfortable as it was, had also become familiar. It had its own rhythms, its own ways of being managed, its own place in your daily emotional landscape. When it ends, even towards something better, there is a small loss of the specific relationship you had built with the waiting itself. Let that grief be there too, briefly, alongside the relief. It does not cancel out the good news. It is simply the natural response to any significant transition, even a positive one. Acknowledging it lets it pass through quickly, rather than sitting underneath the relief as an unprocessed confusion about why you do not feel only happy about something good happening. The hidden thing becoming visible. How to receive a revelation without overreacting to it. When something hidden becomes visible, there is often an immediate pull toward overcorrection. If the revelation is about a relationship, the pull might be toward immediately reassessing the entire relationship based on this one new piece of information. If the revelation is about a situation, the pull might be toward immediately restructuring your entire approach to that situation. Resist the overcorrection today. A single piece of new information, however significant, is one piece of information. It changes the picture, but it does not replace the picture. The revelation that arrives today is important specifically because it completes something that was incomplete, not because it invalidates everything that came before it. Here is a useful way to hold a revelation like this. Receive it fully today. Let it land. Let it be as significant as it is. But give yourself permission to not act on it immediately. Let it sit alongside everything you already knew for a day, 2 days, even longer if needed. The revelation that arrives through a Uranus transit is often the missing piece of a much larger picture, and the most useful response to a missing piece is not to immediately rebuild the entire picture around it, but to let the picture reform naturally now that the piece is present. Some revelations call for action. Many call for nothing more than understanding. Today, focus on the understanding. The action, if it is needed, will become clear once the understanding has had time to settle. The door that opens, how to walk through it without rushing. The door that opens today, the one you stopped watching, carries a specific kind of urgency with it. Doors that open suddenly after a long closure often produce a feeling that they might close again just as suddenly, and that feeling can produce a rush to walk through immediately, to grab the opportunity before it disappears, to move quickly because slow movement feels like risk. Some of that urgency is legitimate. Uranian openings can be time-sensitive in ways that more gradual openings are not. But there is a difference between moving with appropriate timeliness and moving from panic, and the difference matters because decisions made from panic, even decisions that are ultimately the right decisions, tend to be made without the full presence that the decision deserves. Here is the balance. When the door opens today, acknowledge it immediately. Do not let it sit unacknowledged out of caution or disbelief, but give yourself enough space, even just a few hours, even just until tomorrow, to feel into it before deciding exactly how to walk through it. The door opening today does not require you to have already walked all the way through it by tonight. It requires you to see it, to recognize what it is, and to begin moving toward it with the specific kind of presence that lets you walk through it well rather than just walk through it fast. The door is open. It is not going to slam shut in the next hour. Take the time you need to walk through it the right way. Now I want to say something about what today means in the context of the bigger picture of where you are in your life right now. Uranus square the nodes does not happen randomly, in the sense that it happens at a specific point in the much longer cycle of your own personal growth. The South Node patterns that are being disrupted today are patterns that took time to form. They served a purpose once. They were not mistakes. They were the appropriate way of operating for an earlier version of your life, a version that needed those patterns in order to function, to survive, to get through whatever it needed to get through. The fact that those patterns are now being disrupted is not a judgment on the earlier version of you that needed them. It is simply an indication that the earlier version of you has done its work, and the current version of you is ready for something different. This matters because the disruption today is not erasing anything. It is not saying that the way you have been living was wrong. It is saying that the way you have been living has completed its purpose, and something new is ready to begin. Hold today with that understanding. Whatever shifts, whatever becomes visible, whatever opens, none of it is a correction of a mistake. It is the natural unfolding of a process that has been building for a long time, arriving at the point where the building gives way to the becoming. And one final thing, for anyone reading this who is encountering the message later in the day, after the morning has passed, after the obvious signs of a major shift may or may not have already appeared, and who is wondering whether they have missed it. You have not missed it. Uranus transits are not single-moment events that happen and then are over. The energy of a square like this one moves through an entire day and often through the days surrounding it as well. If the morning was ordinary, the afternoon or the evening may carry what the morning did not. If today feels so far like an unremarkable day, that does not mean the shift is not happening. It may simply mean it is happening quietly, in a form that has not yet become visible. Stay present through the rest of today. Notice the frozen situation. Notice anything that feels like a piece of information arriving that completes something. Notice any door, however small, that seems to be opening in a direction you had stopped looking at. Whatever time of day it is right now, the shift is available to you. Today is the day, and the day is not over yet. Now I want to say one more thing about Uranus specifically, something that distinguishes this planet from every other influence in astrology, and something that explains why a transit like today's tends to produce stories that people remember for years afterward, rather than experiences that fade into the background of an ordinary week. Uranus is associated with the unexpected. Not unexpected in the sense of surprising in a minor way, but unexpected in the sense of arriving from outside the system entirely. Most change in life follows a kind of internal logic. You can often see it coming, even if you cannot predict the exact timing. A relationship that has been struggling eventually ends or eventually resolves. A situation that has been building eventually reaches its conclusion. The logic of the situation points toward its own outcome, even if the outcome is uncertain. Uranian change does not follow that logic. It arrives from outside the system. The solution to a problem comes from a direction that had nothing to do with the problem. The person who changes everything is someone you were not thinking about. The opportunity that opens has nothing to do with the path you were on. It is change that could not have been predicted by looking at the situation itself, because it does not come from the situation. It comes from outside it. This is part of why Uranian days tend to produce the stories people tell for years. Not because the change itself is necessarily larger than other kinds of change, but because the specific quality of where it comes from, the outside the system quality, the I never would have guessed quality, gives it a kind of mythic shape in memory. It becomes the day everything changed, not because of a slow build that finally reached its peak, but because of something that arrived sideways from a direction nobody was watching and rearranged everything in its wake. If today produces something like this for you, something that does not seem to follow from anything you were already tracking, something that arrives sideways rather than head-on, recognize it for what it is. This is exactly the signature of the energy that is active today. The thing that does not fit the pattern is not an anomaly. It is the point. Stay open to the sideways thing today, the conversation that has nothing to do with what you were thinking about but that changes how you think about it, the piece of information that arrives from a completely unrelated context but that suddenly applies directly to something else entirely. The person who appears, the message that lands, the idea that surfaces, none of which connect logically to anything you were expecting, but all of which carry weight precisely because of how unexpectedly they arrived. The frozen situation is thawing. The hidden thing is becoming visible. The door you stopped watching is opening. And the form all three of these take today may not look like what you would have predicted, because the energy moving today does not operate by prediction. It operates by arrival. Stay present, stay awake, and let today be exactly as unexpected as it needs to be. Now, one last thing, because I think it matters more than it might initially seem to. There is a particular kind of person who tends to be most affected by a transit like this one, and it is worth describing because you may recognize yourself in it. It is the person who has spent a long time being patient, not passively patient, not someone who simply let life happen to them, but actively patient. Someone who kept showing up to a situation that was not moving, who kept tending to a relationship that was not reciprocating in the way they hoped, who kept working toward something even when the working did not seem to be producing results, because some part of them trusted that the lack of visible movement did not mean the absence of underlying movement. This kind of patience is exhausting in a way that is hard to explain to people who have not experienced it. It is not the exhaustion of effort. It is the exhaustion of sustained, quiet faith in something that the visible evidence does not support, of continuing to invest in a direction while watching that direction produce nothing you can point to, of holding a belief that something is happening beneath the surface while the surface itself remains stubbornly unchanged. If this describes you today is in a very real sense for you specifically, because Uranus square the nodes does not create movement out of nothing. It releases movement that has been building, and the building requires exactly the kind of sustained, quiet investment that this kind of patience represents. The energy that is being released today did not come from nowhere. It came from every day you kept showing up to something that was not yet showing up for you. Today is the day that investment starts to become visible. Not because today is special in some arbitrary cosmic sense, but because today is the day the configuration finally allows what has been building to break through into view. If you have been the person who kept going, who kept believing, who kept tending to something without the evidence to justify it, today is when that tending starts to show its results. Not because you did anything different today, because today is when the structure that was holding the results back finally gives way. Type 1212 in the comments. The universe is watching who is awake right now.